My name is Samantha Mitchell, and I'm 26 years old. Today, I'm a senior software engineer at one of the largest tech companies in the country with my own home in San Francisco. But 15 years ago, I watched my parents' car disappear down a gravel driveway after they called me a financial burden and left me at a foster home. Last month, they reached out for the first time, begging for $50,000 to save themselves from bankruptcy. The irony isn't lost on me. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone gave up on you. Your journey matters too. Before everything fell apart, we were just an ordinary middle-class family in Seattle. My dad worked at a manufacturing plant, my mom had a part-time job at a local department store, and I was an average 11-year-old who loved math, collected seashells, and had a room painted light blue with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. We weren't rich, but I never thought we were poor either. We took modest vacations to the Oregon coast each summer. I got new clothes at the start of each school year, and our fridge was always full. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. At least that's what I thought. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I missed as a child. The whispered arguments between my parents late at night about credit card bills. The gradual downsizing from our 3-bedroom house to a smaller 2-bedroom apartment across town. The way my mom would calculate everything in her shopping cart before reaching the checkout. The increasing tension in my dad's voice whenever I asked for anything. New colored pencils for school, money for a field trip, or even just ice cream from the corner store. Dad lost his job in April, about 6 months before they left me. The manufacturing plant had been struggling for years, and they finally closed, leaving hundreds of workers scrambling in an already tight job market. I remember the day he came home early, his lunchbox still full, his face ashen. "They're shutting us down," he told my mother, his voice hollow. Effective immediately. Mom tried to pick up more shifts at the department store, but the extra hours weren't enough to cover our expenses. Dad's unemployment checks barely covered rent. I started noticing less food in the pantry, the thermostat set lower to save on heating, and the growing pile of envelopes stamped "Final Notice" on the kitchen counter. What I noticed most, though, was how they began to look at me, like I was an equation that wouldn't balance, a problem they couldn't solve. The bedtime stories stopped. The quick kisses on my forehead before school disappeared. Their eyes would slide past me at dinner, and sometimes I heard my name in their late-night arguments, followed by frustrated sighs. It was a Tuesday in October when everything changed. I remember the specific details with the kind of clarity that only comes from replaying a memory thousands of times. I was wearing my favorite purple sweater and jeans. Dad had made pancakes for breakfast. A rare treat that should have been a warning sign. Mom had brushed my hair and helped me put it in a ponytail, her fingers lingering on my shoulders a moment too long. "We're going to visit some relatives today," she said, her voice too bright, too cheerful. "Pack an overnight bag, okay? Just some pajamas and clothes for tomorrow." I was confused. We didn't have many relatives nearby, but I did as I was told. I grabbed my backpack too, assuming I'd still be going to school. When I came downstairs, Dad was loading a cardboard box into the trunk of our car. "What's that?" I asked. "Just some of your things," he answered without meeting my eyes. "Extra clothes and stuff." The drive was long and silent. My parents didn't play the radio like they usually did on car trips. Mom kept checking her makeup in the visor mirror, reapplying lipstick she'd already put on perfectly. Dad's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I watched the familiar neighborhoods give way to parts of the city I didn't recognize, then to suburbs, then to areas with more trees than houses. We pulled up to a large, institutional-looking building with a sign that read "Evergreen Children's Services." A woman in a gray pantsuit was waiting on the steps. "Who's that?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "What is this place?" "Come on, Samantha," Mom said, opening her car door. "We need to talk to these people." Inside, we sat in an office with faded inspirational posters on the wall. A box of tissues sat on the desk between us and the woman in the pantsuit, whose name tag read Ms. Peterson, Family Services Coordinator. I still remember how the air conditioning was set too cold, how my hands wouldn't stop trembling, how the clock on the wall seemed to tick too loudly. "Samantha," my father said finally, his voice flat, "you're going to be staying here for a while." "What? Why? For how long?" The questions tumbled out as panic rose in my chest. "We can't afford to keep you anymore," my mother said, her eyes focused on her purse, not on me. "The bills are too much. We're about to lose our apartment." "But I don't cost that much," I argued, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I can eat less. I don't need new clothes. Please don't leave me here." "It's not just food and clothes," Dad said, his tone hardening. "It's everything. Healthcare, school supplies, space in the apartment. You've always been a financial burden. We need to start over." The word burden hit me like a physical blow. I'd never thought of myself that way, as something weighing them down, something they needed to be free from. "We've already signed the paperwork," Mom added, standing up. "Miss Peterson will take good care of you. They'll find you a nice foster home." I couldn't process what was happening. Foster home? Those were for kids whose parents died or who were abused. Not for kids whose parents just decided they cost too much money. "You can't do this," I said, my voice rising. "I'm your daughter. You can't just leave me here." Dad checked his watch. "We need to go. The longer we drag this out, the harder it will be." I lunged toward my mother then, grabbing her coat, tears streaming down my face. "Mom, please. I'll be good. I promise I won't ask for anything. Please don't leave me." She peeled my fingers off her coat, her own eyes damp but resolved. "This is for the best, Samantha. Someday you'll understand." Miss Peterson held me back as they walked out. I broke free and ran after them, making it to the front steps just in time to see our family car pull away, neither of them looking back. I collapsed on those steps, screaming their names until my voice gave out, waiting for them to realize their mistake and return. They never did. That night, I slept in a small room with a twin bed and a dresser, the first of many such rooms I would occupy over the next several years. I kept my clothes in my backpack, convinced they would come back for me tomorrow, or the next day, or next week at the latest. I refused to unpack the cardboard box they'd left, as if doing so would mean accepting that this wasn't temporary. I cried myself to sleep that night, and many nights after, clutching my purple sweater. The last thing my mother had touched before she decided I wasn't worth keeping. The foster care system is a maze that no child should have to navigate. The first few weeks after my parents left me were a blur of social worker visits, paperwork, and psychological evaluations. Everyone kept asking how I was feeling, but no one seemed to have time to actually listen to my answer. I was assigned a case number, given a small allowance for personal items, and told to adjust to my new reality. My first placement was with the Harris family, who already had 4 other foster children in a 3-bedroom house. Mrs. Harris was perpetually exhausted, running from one crisis to another, while Mr. Harris worked double shifts as a security guard. They weren't unkind, but there simply wasn't enough attention to go around. I shared a room with 2 other girls, Destiny, who was 14 and had been in the system since she was a toddler, and Kayla, who was 9 and whose mother was in prison. "Don't get too comfortable," Destiny told me on my first night there. "No one stays here long. Either your parents come back or they move you somewhere else." "My parents are coming back," I insisted, still clinging to that hope. Destiny just gave me a sad, knowing look. "Sure they are, new girl. Sure they are." School became a nightmare. I had to transfer to a new district, and word quickly spread that I was a foster kid. The pitying looks from teachers were almost as bad as the taunts from classmates. "Did your parents not want you?" one girl asked during lunch. "My mom says only bad kids get sent to foster care." "I'm not bad," I whispered, but the seed of doubt had been planted. What if I was? What if there was something wrong with me that made me unlovable, unkeepable? My grades began to slide. I couldn't concentrate in class, too consumed with watching the door, half expecting, half hoping my parents would walk in and take me home. I stopped raising my hand, stopped participating in group activities, stopped making eye contact with anyone. It was as if I believed that by making myself smaller, less noticeable, I could also make myself less of a burden, the word that kept echoing in my head. After 6 months with the Harris family, I was moved to my second placement. The Reynolds household was stricter but more stable. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds were older, in their late 50s, and had been fostering children for over 20 years. They had clear rules, consistent consequences, and a rotating chore chart that applied equally to everyone. There were 3 other foster children there, all boys younger than me. "You can stay as long as you need to," Mrs. Reynolds told me when I arrived. "But we don't make promises about forever. We're a way station, not a destination." At least she was honest. It was at the Reynolds home that I met Ashley, their biological granddaughter, who visited every weekend. She was my age and treated me like a normal person, not a charity case or a problem to be solved. She invited me to hang out in her grandmother's garden, taught me how to make friendship bracelets, and never once asked why I was in foster care. "Grandma and Grandpa help kids who need a safe place," she explained simply. "That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you." It was the first time since my abandonment that someone had suggested that the problem wasn't me. I stayed with the Reynolds family for almost 2 years. I slowly began to rebuild my grades, though I still kept to myself at school. I developed a system for protecting myself emotionally. Don't get attached, don't expect permanence, don't ask for help, don't become a burden. I kept everything I owned packed in a duffel bag, ready to move at a moment's notice. When I was 14, Mr. Reynolds had a stroke, and they could no longer care for foster children. I was moved again, this time to a home with an elderly woman named Mrs. Bennett. She lived alone in a small, neat house filled with books and plants. She had been a high school mathematics teacher before retiring and had started fostering because my house is too quiet now. Mrs. Bennett was different from my previous foster parents. She asked questions about what I was learning in school and actually listened to the answers. She noticed that I finished my math homework quickly and brought home extra worksheets for me. When she saw me reading the same tattered library book about computers for the 3rd time, she took me to a bookstore and bought me 2 new books on programming. "You have a gift for logical thinking," she told me one night as we sat at her kitchen table. "Have you ever thought about a career in technology?" I shrugged. I hadn't thought much about any future beyond surviving the present. "Well, you should," she continued, undeterred by my silence. "The world needs more women in STEM fields, and you have the mind for it." Mrs. Bennett was the first person since my abandonment who seemed to see potential in me rather than problems. She didn't treat me like a burden or a charity case. She treated me like a person with a future worth investing in. There were still hard days, of course. Days when I'd see a mother and daughter shopping together at the mall and feel a pain so acute it was physical. Days when school forms requiring a parent or guardian signature would send me into a quiet panic. Days when I'd wake up from dreams where my parents had come back for me, only to realize they were just dreams. But Mrs. Bennett taught me something crucial, that small kindnesses can keep you going when nothing else will. A cup of hot chocolate waiting after a difficult day at school. A quiet, "I'm proud of you," when I brought home a good grade. The gentle correction of, "It's our home, not my home," when I would apologize for taking up space. These moments became stepping stones across the river of abandonment I was trying to cross. Not enough to make me forget the water beneath, but enough to keep me from drowning in it. By the time I entered high school, I had constructed a careful identity for myself. To teachers, I was the quiet, studious girl who turned in assignments on time and never caused trouble. To classmates, I was politely distant, present but not truly participating in the social ecosystem of teenage life. And to myself, I was a survivor, someone who had learned that the only person I could truly count on was me. I threw myself into academics with an intensity that surprised even Mrs. Bennett. While other teens were concerned with dating and parties, I saw education as my lifeline, my only chance to create a future where I would never again be at someone else's mercy. I took every advanced class available, stayed late to use the school computers, and checked out as many books as the library would allow. "You need balance, Samantha," Mrs. Bennett would gently suggest when she found me studying until midnight. "All work and no play isn't healthy." but work felt safe in a way that play didn't. Books didn't abandon you. Equations didn't call you a burden. Academic achievement provided the validation I craved without the risk of emotional attachment. Everything changed during my sophomore year when I reluctantly signed up for an elective computer science class to fulfill a technology requirement. From the moment Mr. Johnson, a former software developer turned teacher, introduced us to our first programming language, something clicked. There was a beautiful logic to coding that spoke to me, clear problems with definable solutions, a language that meant exactly what it said without hidden emotional agendas. "You have a natural aptitude for this," Mr. Johnson told me after I completed an assignment in half the allotted time. "Have you considered pursuing computer science in college?" College had always been a vague goal, but suddenly it had direction. I began staying after school to work on additional projects in the computer lab. Mr. Johnson lent me books on advanced programming concepts and helped me set up a development environment on the ancient laptop Mrs. Bennett had found at a garage sale for me. That summer, I found a job at Computer Fix, a local repair shop owned by a former student of Mrs. Bennett's. The pay wasn't much, but I saved every penny in an account Mrs. Bennett helped me open. "Your escape fund," she called it with a wink, but we both knew that's exactly what it was. By senior year, I had a clear plan. Earn a scholarship to study computer science, graduate with marketable skills, and build a life where financial security would mean never being a burden to anyone and never being vulnerable to abandonment again. With Mrs. Bennett's encouragement and Mr. Johnson's guidance, I applied for every scholarship I could find. I wrote essays about overcoming adversity, filled out financial aid forms, and submitted programming projects as supplements to my applications. The day the email came from State University offering a full academic scholarship, Mrs. Bennett and I danced around her small kitchen, laughing and crying at the same time. It was the first moment of pure, uncomplicated joy I could remember since before my parents left me. Graduation day arrived with a bittersweet wait. As I sat in my cap and gown waiting for my name to be called, I scanned the audience out of habit, some small, foolish part of me still hoping that maybe, just maybe, my parents would be there. They weren't, of course. But Mrs. Bennett was, sitting proudly in the third row, alongside Mr. Johnson and even my previous foster mother, Mrs. Reynolds, who had recovered enough from her husband's passing to attend. When I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I heard Mrs. Bennett's clear voice calling, "That's my girl," and realized that sometimes the family you find can matter just as much as the family you lose. After the ceremony, Mrs. Bennett presented me with a gift, a brand new laptop, far better than anything I could have afforded on my own. "For college," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And for all the amazing things you're going to create." I hugged her tightly, finally allowing myself to acknowledge how much she had come to mean to me. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything." "Just promise me one thing," she replied. "Don't let what they did define what you become." I nodded, but inside I made a different promise to myself. I would build a life so successful, so secure, that I would never need anyone who didn't want me. I would transform myself from the burden my parents had discarded into someone they would regret abandoning. Moving into the college dorms that fall was terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, I wasn't the foster kid, I was just another freshman, with the same anxieties and possibilities as everyone else. My roommate Jessica knew nothing about my past, and I preferred to keep it that way, deflecting personal questions with vague answers about growing up in Seattle. As I unpacked my carefully packed duffel bag, still a habit after years of unexpected moves, I placed Mrs. Bennett's laptop on my desk and looked around at this new beginning. The fear was still there, humming beneath everything like background radiation, but alongside it was something new, determination. Not just to survive, but to thrive. College was both a revelation and a challenge. Academically, I excelled in ways that surprised even me. The computer science program was rigorous, but the logical frameworks and problem-solving approaches came naturally to me. I earned top grades, impressed my professors, and quickly became known as someone who could untangle even the most complex coding problems. But socially and emotionally, I still struggled with the aftereffects of abandonment. I kept most people at a careful distance, revealing little about my background and deflecting personal questions. My roommate Jessica was persistent, though. She invited me to study groups, saved me a seat in the dining hall, and slowly chipped away at the walls I had built. You know, she said one night as we were cramming for midterms, for someone so smart, you're really bad at letting people be your friend. Her directness startled a laugh out of me. Is that what you're trying to do? Be my friend. Trying and largely failing, she replied with a grin. But I'm stubborn. Gradually, I let Jessica and a few others from our study group get closer. We celebrated birthdays together, spent late nights debugging each other's projects, and created inside jokes that became our own language. It wasn't easy. Every time I shared something personal, my instinct was to withdraw, to protect myself from the inevitable rejection. But it got easier with practice. During my sophomore year, at Jessica's insistence, I started seeing a therapist at the University Counseling Center. Dr. Mitchell, no relation, though the coincidence of her last name matching mine always seemed significant somehow, specialized in trauma and abandonment issues. What your parents did was about them, not you, she told me in one of our early sessions. No child is a burden. Children are responsibilities, yes, but the decision to abandon that responsibility reflects a failure in the parent, not the child. Intellectually, I understood her point, but emotionally, I still carried the weight of being unwanted. We worked on this disconnect week after week, slowly untangling the knots of shame and self-doubt that had formed around my perception of self-worth. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during my junior year. I had been dating David, a kind and patient engineering student, for several months, my first serious relationship. When he told me he loved me one evening as we walked back from the library, I panicked. I broke up with him the next day, unable to articulate why his love felt more threatening than comforting. In my next therapy session, as I tried to explain my reaction, something cracked open inside me. For the first time since the day my parents left me on those foster home steps, I truly cried, not the controlled tears I'd allowed myself in private moments, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from the core of my being. They were supposed to love me, I gasped between sobs. Parents are supposed to love their children no matter what. But I wasn't enough. I wasn't worth keeping. Dr. Mitchell handed me tissues, but didn't interrupt, letting me finally express the raw hurt I'd been carrying for years. You're right, she said when my tears finally subsided. Parents are supposed to love their children unconditionally. And when they fail to do that, it's devastating. But their failure doesn't define your worth. It was a turning point. I didn't magically heal overnight, but naming the core wound allowed me to begin addressing it directly rather than building my life around avoiding it. I didn't get back together with David, that relationship had run its course, but I did learn to be more open with the friends who had proven themselves trustworthy. I told Jessica about my past, about being abandoned and growing up in foster care. Her response, fierce indignation on my behalf, followed by a tight hug and a simple, their loss, was more healing than she could know. Professionally, my path continued upward. An algorithm I developed for a class project caught the attention of a visiting tech recruiter, leading to a prestigious internship the summer before my senior year. The company culture was intense but exhilarating, full of brilliant minds solving complex problems. For the first time, I found myself among people who valued me explicitly for what I could contribute, my intelligence, my creativity, my work ethic. 2 weeks before the internship ended, my supervisor called me into his office. I went in expecting feedback on my final project. I came out with a job offer for after graduation, complete with a 6-figure salary, stock options, and relocation assistance to San Francisco. We don't usually hire directly from internships, he explained, but your work has been exceptional. We'd be foolish to let you go elsewhere. The validation was intoxicating. In that moment, standing in that glass-walled office with the job offer in my hands, I felt a sense of triumph that went beyond professional achievement. This wasn't just a job, it was proof that I had value, that I was worth investing in, that I had transformed myself from a burden into an asset. My graduation ceremony was a far cry from my high school commencement. Mrs. Bennet was there, of course, beaming with pride. But so were Mr. Johnson, who had become a mentor and friend, Jessica and our study group, and even Mrs. Reynolds and two of my former foster siblings. As I accepted my diploma with highest honors, I heard their cheers and felt, perhaps for the first time, that I had created something like a family for myself, not bound by blood, but by choice and mutual care. After graduation, I moved to San Francisco and threw myself into my new job. The learning curve was steep, but I thrived on the challenge. I worked long hours, earned rapid promotions, and saved aggressively. My colleagues invited me to happy hours and weekend hikes, and I found myself slowly building a social circle in my new city. At 24, I bought my first home, a modest condo in a good neighborhood with bay windows and hardwood floors. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I felt a profound sense of security. This was mine. A place where no one could tell me to pack my things and leave, where I made the rules, where I belonged simply because I had earned the right to be there. On the surface, my life looked like a success story, the foster child who overcame abandonment to build a thriving career and independent life. And in many ways, it was. I had financial security, professional respect, and a small but genuine circle of friends. I had proven to myself and the world that I wasn't a burden but an asset. But in quiet moments, especially late at night in my beautiful new home, I still felt the empty space where unconditional love should have been. For all my outward success, I had everything except the one thing I'd never been able to earn or buy: a family who would love me simply for being me, not for what I could achieve or contribute. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning 3 months ago. I was working from home, reviewing code for a project launch, when my phone pinged with a LinkedIn notification. I almost ignored it, probably just another recruiter trying to poach me for a competitor, but something made me glance at the screen. The name stopped my heart: Michael Mitchell. My father. For a moment, I thought it must be a mistake or a bizarre coincidence. In 15 years, there had been no birthday cards, no Christmas greetings, not even a casual check to see if I was alive. Why no? Why LinkedIn of all places? My hands shaking, I opened the message. "Samantha, I hope this finds you well. Your mother and I have been thinking about you and would like to reconnect. Some family circumstances have changed, and we feel it's time to heal old wounds. Could we talk? Dad. Dad." As if he still had the right to call himself that. I threw my phone across the room, where it bounced off the couch cushions and landed on the floor. Nausea rose in my throat. 15 years of silence, and now family circumstances made reconnection convenient? What circumstances? And what made them think I would want to hear from them after all this time? I called Jessica, who had moved to San Francisco a year after me and lived just a few blocks away. She came over immediately, bringing ice cream and a protective fury that helped counterbalance my shock. "You don't owe them anything," she said firmly as we sat on my balcony. Not a response, not forgiveness, nothing. "I know," I replied, but something inside me needed answers. Why no? What did they want? The next day, I discussed the message with Dr. Mitchell during our weekly video therapy session. I'd continued therapy even after moving, finding it essential for processing the ongoing impacts of my abandonment. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I'd shown her the message. "Part of me wants to ignore it," I admitted. "But another part wants to know why they're reaching out now. And maybe," I hesitated, embarrassed by the vulnerability, "maybe I want them to see what they threw away. That I'm not a burden anymore." She nodded. "Both reactions are completely valid. If you do decide to respond, you can set firm boundaries. This is your life now, and you get to control who has access to it." After careful consideration, I sent a brief, neutral reply: "I'm surprised to hear from you after 15 years. I would need to understand your motivations before considering any form of reconnection. Samantha." His response came within hours, far too quickly for the weight of what he was sharing. "Samantha, thank you for responding. The truth is, we're in a difficult situation. Your mother has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and has significant medical bills. We've declared bankruptcy and are at risk of losing our house. We've exhausted all other options and are hoping you might be in a position to help family in need. We're looking at needing about $50,000 to get back on our feet. I understand this is a lot to ask after so much time, but family helps family. You're doing so well now. I stared at the message, a strange mixture of emotions washing over me: rage, hurt, vindication, and an unexpected sense of power. They hadn't reached out because they missed me, regretted their actions, or wanted to make amends. They reached out because they needed money. I had transformed from a financial burden to a financial resource. The irony was both painful and grimly satisfying. Against Jessica's advice, but with Dr. Mitchell's guidance, I agreed to a phone call. I needed to hear their voices, to confront this ghost from my past directly rather than through carefully crafted messages. The call was surreal. My mother's voice was older, more fragile than I remembered, but still carried the same soft Southern accent that had once narrated my bedtime stories. My father sounded defensive from the start, as if anticipating my anger. What struck me most was how they spoke about the abandonment as a regrettable but ultimately minor event, like missing a child's school play or forgetting a birthday. "We always knew you'd land on your feet," my mother said. "You are such a resourceful child." "The foster system worked out for you," my father added. "Look how well you've done for yourself. Better than you might have if we'd kept struggling together." Their casual reframing of their abandonment as some kind of favor to me ignited a fury I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. "You left me on the steps of a foster home," I said, my voice shaking. "You called me a burden to my face. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? Do you know how many years of therapy I've needed to believe I have basic human worth?" "We were desperate," my mother said, a note of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "We did what was best for everyone at the time." "Best for everyone?" I echoed. "Or best for you?" "You turned out fine," my father insisted. "Better than fine. And now we're the ones in desperate straits. Surely you can see that everything happens for a reason. Maybe this was all part of God's plan. You becoming successful so you could help your family when we needed it." I nearly hung up then. Their audacity was breathtaking, to abandon me, to have no contact for 15 years, and then to suggest that the purpose of my pain and subsequent success was to bail them out financially. But there was one question I needed answered. Did you ever try to find out what happened to me? All these years, did you ever check to see if I was okay? The silence that followed was answer enough. The aftermath of that phone call left me reeling. I experienced insomnia for the first time since college, lying awake at night replaying their words, imagining all the things I should have said. My appetite disappeared, and I found myself making careless errors at work, something that had never happened before. Jessica was furious on my behalf. The absolute nerve, she fumed during one of our dinner nights. To abandon you, ignore you for 15 years, and then ask for money? Block their numbers and be done with it. Her protective outrage was comforting, but the situation felt more complicated than that. Not because I felt any obligation to help them, I didn't, but because their reappearance had reopened wounds I thought had long since scarred over. I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Mitchell, who listened calmly as I recounted the conversation. "What do you want from this situation?" she asked when I finished. "Not what you think you should want, or what would make you look good to others. What would bring you peace?" I considered her question seriously. I want them to acknowledge what they did, really acknowledge it, not dismiss it as some favor they did me. I want them to understand the damage they caused. I paused, digging deeper. And I guess, part of me wants revenge. Wants them to suffer like I suffered. "That's an honest answer," she replied. Revenge is a natural human desire after being hurt. But I want you to consider, would their suffering heal your wounds? Or would it just create new ones? Her questions stayed with me in the days that followed. Would it bring me satisfaction to deny them help, knowing they might lose their home just as they'd made me lose mine? The thought had a certain symmetry that appealed to the wounded child in me. But the adult I'd become wasn't sure that inflicting pain, however deserved, aligned with the person I wanted to be. Still, I wasn't ready to simply write them a check and pretend the past never happened. I needed to verify their claims, to understand exactly what I might be getting involved in. With my technology skills, it wasn't difficult to research their situation from a distance. I confirmed that my mother had indeed been diagnosed with MS 3 years earlier. Medical bills had piled up, especially after my father's health insurance, through his new job, covered only a portion of her treatments. They had declared Chapter 13 bankruptcy 6 months ago, but were failing to meet the payment plan. Foreclosure proceedings on their modest home in a Tacoma suburb had begun. The facts aligned with their story, which brought me no satisfaction. It would have been easier if they had been lying, if this had been a simple scam I could dismiss. The truth, that they were genuinely desperate, forced me to confront harder questions about compassion, forgiveness, and what I owed to people who had caused me profound harm. I drafted countless emails over the next week, each reflecting a different facet of my conflicted feelings. Some were scathing rejections, laying out in precise detail how their abandonment had affected me and why I owed them nothing. Others offered financial help with strict conditions attached. Still others were more generous, offering assistance with medical bills directly to the providers rather than giving them cash. None felt right. In my next therapy session, I brought printouts of several draft responses, asking Dr. Mitchell which she thought I should send. These all reflect different parts of you, she observed after reading them. The hurt child, the protective adult, the compassionate human being. But ultimately, this decision isn't about them, it's about you. Who do you want to be in this situation? How do you want to look back on this chapter of your life? Her perspective shifted something fundamental in my thinking. I had been so focused on my parents, their audacity, their needs, their failings, that I had forgotten my own agency in defining this interaction. Their actions had shaped my past, but they didn't have to determine my future choices. I think I need to see them, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it. In person, not just over the phone or email. Before I decide anything, I need to look them in the eyes and have an honest conversation about what happened and why they're reaching out now. Dr. Mitchell nodded. That takes courage. What boundaries will you need to feel safe in that meeting? We spent the rest of the session planning. I would meet them in a public place, a coffee shop in Seattle. I would bring Jessica for support. I would prepare specific questions and set clear time limits. Most importantly, I would remember that regardless of how the meeting went, I was no longer the vulnerable child they had abandoned. I was an adult with choices, resources, and a support system they had no power to take away. 2 weeks later, I flew to Seattle, staying with Jessica's brother who had an apartment downtown. The night before the meeting, I could barely sleep, my mind cycling through imagined scenarios ranging from tearful reconciliation to furious confrontation. No matter what happens, Jessica reassured me over breakfast, you've already won. Look at who you've become despite what they did. They can't take that away from you. I held on to her words as we drove to the coffee shop, watching familiar Seattle landmarks pass by my window, the city where I had once been someone's daughter, before I became no one's. The coffee shop was a neutral space with exposed brick walls and the comforting hum of espresso machines. Jessica and I arrived 20 minutes early, securing a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entrance. I ordered a latte but couldn't drink it, my stomach too tight with anticipation. At exactly noon, they walked in. The sight of them after 15 years was jarring, like looking at familiar strangers. My father's once dark hair was now steel gray, his shoulders slightly stooped. My mother was thinner than I remembered, moving carefully with the assistance of a cane. A visible sign of her illness. They scanned the room, and I saw the moment of recognition in their eyes when they spotted me. Jessica squeezed my hand under the table as they approached. I'm right here, she whispered. Samantha, my mother said, her voice wavering. You look so beautiful. So grown up. An awkward moment followed as they seemed unsure whether to hug me or shake my hand. I made no move to stand, and they settled into the chairs across from us. This is my friend Jessica, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She'll be joining us. My father nodded, looking uncomfortable. Thank you for meeting with us. It means a lot. The initial conversation was painfully superficial, comments about the weather, the coffee shop, my flight from San Francisco. They asked generic questions about my job, my home, my life in California, as if we were distant relatives catching up at a family reunion rather than parents who had abandoned their child. After 15 minutes of this strained small talk, I set my untouched coffee aside and cut to the heart of the matter. "Let's talk about why you abandoned me," I said directly. "I need to understand what happened 15 years ago before we discuss anything about the present." My bluntness seemed to startle them. They exchanged glances, and my father cleared his throat. "We were in a desperate financial situation," he began, repeating the explanation from our phone call. "The plant had closed. We were behind on rent. Your mother's hours had been cut. Many families face financial hardship," I interrupted. "Most don't abandon their children because of it." "You don't understand how bad it was," my mother said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "We were about to be homeless. We thought you'd have better opportunities in the system than living in a shelter or a car with us. Did you explore other options?" I asked. "Family members who could have helped? Government assistance programs? Child support services that might have allowed you to keep me?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't have family who could help. And we were too proud to take handouts back then. Too proud for government assistance, but not too proud to abandon your child." Jessica interjected, unable to contain herself. I touched her arm gently, appreciating her support but wanting to handle this myself. "What I'm trying to understand," I continued, "is whether abandonment was truly the only option, or whether it was simply the most convenient one for you." My mother's eyes welled with tears. "It wasn't convenient, Samantha. It was the hardest thing we ever did." "And yet you did it," I replied, keeping my voice level. "And then you never checked on me, never tried to find out if I was okay, never sent so much as a birthday card. Until now, when you need money." My father looked down at his hands. "We told ourselves you were better off without us. That a clean break would be less painful than a regular contact. And then as time passed, it seemed too late to reach out. Until you needed financial help," I pressed. "Yes," he admitted, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Until we needed help." There was something in his direct acknowledgement that I appreciated, even as it confirmed my suspicions about their motivations. "There's something else you should know," my mother said quietly. "Something that might help explain, though not excuse, what happened." I waited, bracing myself for whatever revelation was coming. "After we left you, we had another child. Your brother, Mark. He's 14 now." The words hit me like a physical blow. A brother. A child they had chosen to keep, to raise, to love, when they had decided I was too much of a burden. "You replaced me," I whispered, the pain fresh and sharp. "It wasn't like that," my father said quickly. "Deborah got pregnant unexpectedly about a year after you went into foster care. We were starting to get back on our feet, had found cheaper housing, but you still couldn't take me back." I interrupted, the implications sinking in. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Finally, my father spoke, his voice low. "The truth is, we couldn't afford 2 children. We had to make a choice. And you chose him," I said, the final piece falling into place. "The child you hadn't already discarded." "Samantha," my mother began, reaching across the table toward me. I pulled my hands back. "No," I said firmly. "I need you both to acknowledge exactly what you did. No euphemisms about difficult choices or clean breaks. You abandoned your 11-year-old daughter and called her a burden to her face. You chose not to find out what happened to her for 15 years. And when you did finally reach out, it was because you needed money, not because you wanted to make amends." My voice remained steady, but tears were streaming down my face now. Jessica put her arm around my shoulders, glaring at my parents. To my surprise, it was my father who broke first. His shoulders slumped, and he covered his face with his hands. "You're right," he said, his voice cracking. "We did abandon you. We told ourselves it was for your benefit, but that was a lie we created to live with ourselves. The truth is, we were selfish and cowardly. We saw you as an expense we could eliminate to make our lives easier." He looked up, his eyes red. "I am so deeply, profoundly sorry, Samantha. What we did was unforgivable. His raw acknowledgement caught me off guard. I had expected continued justifications, not genuine remorse. My mother's journey to acknowledgement was harder. "We thought we were making a rational decision," she insisted. "We weren't thinking about the emotional impact." "Mom," I interrupted, using the term deliberately for the first time in our conversation. "I was your child, not a line item in your budget. There is no rational justification for what you did." She was quiet for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly around her coffee cup. "You're right," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "We failed you in the most fundamental way parents can fail a child. And I have lived with that shame every day, even as I tried to justify it to myself." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't thought about you and regretted what we did." I sat with their apologies, trying to gauge their sincerity and what it meant to me. I had imagined this moment so many times over the years, sometimes with satisfaction at their suffering, sometimes with fantasies of cold rejection, occasionally with tearful reconciliation. The reality was messier, more nuanced than any scenario I had envisioned. "Here's what I'm willing to do," I said after gathering my thoughts. "I'll help with your medical bills, paid directly to the providers, not to you. I'll also contribute to a fund to prevent foreclosure on your house, but the money will go through an attorney with conditions." My father nodded quickly. "That's more than generous." "I'm not finished," I continued. "My conditions are these. First, you need to continue acknowledging what you did, no more justifications or minimizations. Second, I want to meet my brother. He deserves to know he has a sister, and I deserve to know him." My mother's expression shifted to alarm. "Mark doesn't know about you. We've never told him." "Then it's time he learned the truth," I said firmly. "I'm not expecting to become one big happy family overnight. But I won't be a secret, and I won't let you rewrite history." They exchanged looks, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, my father nodded. "You're right. He should know the truth. All of it." He hesitated. "He's a good kid. Smart, like you. He deserves to know his sister." We spent the next hour working out the practical details of my financial assistance and planning a careful introduction to Mark. I insisted on family therapy sessions to facilitate the process, making it clear that while I was willing to help financially and explore a relationship with my brother, rebuilding trust with them would be a long, uncertain road. As our meeting drew to a close, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Grief for the childhood I had lost, anger that still smoldered beneath the surface, but also a peculiar sense of peace. For the first time, my parents had truly seen me, not as a burden or a resource, but as a person they had harmed who now had the power to set terms for any future relationship. The meeting with Mark took place 2 weeks later in a family therapist's office in Seattle. He was a lanky teenager with the same dark hair I had, looking bewildered and a bit defensive as the therapist helped our parents explain my existence and their past actions. "So you're my sister," he said when we were given time to speak privately. "And they just left you?" "They did," I confirmed, not softening the truth but keeping my tone neutral. "But that doesn't have anything to do with you or who you are to me now." He studied my face, searching for resemblances. "I've always wanted a sibling," he said finally. "I just never imagined finding one like this." Over the next several months, Mark and I developed a cautious relationship through video calls, text messages, and occasional visits when I flew to Seattle. Looking at him was sometimes like looking in a mirror. We shared the same laugh, the same analytical approach to problems, the same dry sense of humor. Getting to know him was the unexpected gift in this complicated situation. My relationship with my parents evolved more slowly and with stricter boundaries. I maintained the financial arrangements we had agreed upon, ensuring my mother received the medical care she needed and they kept their home. But emotional reconnection came in small, careful steps. We began working with a family therapist specializing in estrangement and reconciliation. In those sessions, we explored the full impact of their abandonment, not just on me, but on all of us. The work was painful but necessary, excavating years of buried feelings, unacknowledged harm, and defensive self-deception. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, the therapist reminded us during one particularly difficult session. And it isn't a one-time event, it's a process that may take years. I found wisdom in those words. The journey toward healing wasn't linear. There were days when anger would surge unexpectedly, when a casual comment from my mother would trigger memories of that day on the foster home steps. There were other days when I could see them more clearly as flawed, damaged people who had made a terrible choice they couldn't take back. 6 months after our first meeting in that coffee shop, I realized something important. I was no longer defined by their abandonment. It was a significant chapter in my story, but not the whole book. The person I had become, resilient, successful, capable of deep friendship and cautious love, was shaped by many influences, including Mrs. Bennett's kindness, Mr. Johnson's mentorship, Jessica's loyalty, and my own determination. My parents' abandonment had left wounds that would always be part of me. But those wounds had scarred over, not into hardness, but into a sensitivity to others' pain, an appreciation for chosen family, and a fierce commitment to keeping my promises. You rebuilt yourself, Dr. Mitchell observed during one of our sessions. From the burden they discarded into the strength they now depend on. That's not just survival, that's transformation. Her words resonated with truth. I had transformed, not despite the abandonment, but in complex relationship with it. The 11-year-old girl left on those foster home steps could never have imagined the woman I would become. Someone capable of setting boundaries, offering conditional help, and choosing my own path toward healing. My life is my own now, shaped by my choices rather than their rejection. I continue to build my career, deepen my friendships, and cautiously explore dating again, now with a better understanding of my abandonment triggers. I maintain a relationship with Mark that exists independently of my complicated feelings toward our parents. And I honor the family I've chosen, Jessica, Mrs. Bennett, and others who have loved me not for what I could provide, but simply for who I am. The path forward isn't clear or simple. Reconciliation is neither guaranteed nor necessary for my happiness. What matters is that the choice is mine, to forgive or not, to connect or distance, to help or withhold. My worth was never determined by their ability to recognize it, and my future isn't limited by their past failures. I rebuilt myself from the burden they discarded into the strength they now depend on. My life is my own, and that's something no one can ever abandon again. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after someone gave up on you? Has abandonment shaped your ability to trust or form relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing is knowing we're not alone in our experiences. If my journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by who stays or leaves, but by the strength you find within yourself.